Amazing.
Hi, everyone. This is Sarah. I am the Southern Vermont Economy Project Manager, and this is our 20th session of the Knowledge Bites webinar series. We have Jen Stromsten, who is our newly named Director of Programs at the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation, and she will be talking about our newest program, the Targeted Expertise Recruitment and Retention, or TERR. The goal of this webinar series is to provide high-level introductions to economic and workforce development resources, programs, tools. At the end of each session, like this one, Jen will give you her contact information, so if you want more detail, you can contact her, or I will put resources up on the Knowledge Bites webpage. It's about a 20-minute presentation, then 10 minutes for Q&A. Here, I just say to type into the chat function, but per Jen's request, I will unmute you all so you can interrupt her as we go along. So bear with me as we switch screens, and then I will do the unmuting as Jen begins her presentation. So be sure, if you don't want any background noise, just to keep yourself muted, and then unmute yourself when you want to say something. Jen, do you have the pop-up screen?
I do.
Great.
Now what do I do? Oh, look, start sharing. Sorry, it's down below. Tiny screen problems. All right, I'm going to close this chat box and try to notice if you guys try to chat with me. All right, so I'm going to start with, first I'm going to put a timer on so I make sure I get through sort of the 4 sections of this. This is one of these PowerPoints that's not really designed to be a PowerPoint because it has a lot more words than it should. I'm not going to read them.
Your PowerPoint is not up, by the way.
My PowerPoint is not up. Interesting.
Did you check PowerPoint?
No. How does that work? Hold on. Okay.
Nope.
In my freeconferencecall.com thing.
Hold on one second.
Can you pop up the screen? Yep. I didn't realize I had to do it by program.
Okay, hold on.
Mm-hmm.
Technical difficulties.
All right. Well,
hold.
So I'll give you the background while we're fixing this. Oh, look, PowerPoint slideshow. Sorry about that. So we are the Regional Development Corporation. How's that look?
Perfect.
Better? Great. And as such, we have decades of experience with helping companies to deal with things like infrastructure, operating an industrial park, helping companies to grow physically. In the last several years, through a series of events and processes, most notably our strategic planning, our comprehensive economic development strategies, which we are 4 years into and about to begin the 5-year renewal with our friends in Bennington. Through that process, several years ago, was identified a need for people, and that in addition to companies needing things like water and sewer or highways with nice exits, in order to grow and stay here, that they really needed people. And given the demographics, that was becoming increasingly challenging. And so how this program came about, in a way, was, so about 20 years ago, a company was trying to grow here, and we tried to solve their infrastructure problems, their transportation problems, and that was typical. In the last couple of years, one of our companies was in communication with this organization. The president and CEO is a member of the board, about their attempts to grow and stay here, and that their challenges were most notably around talent. We have already been pretty steeped in the issues around entry level and kind of skilled nursing or CNC machinists, things like that. Their challenge, very specifically, was around trying to bring on board a lot of high levels, of mid and high level management and technical staff. And so I'm going to walk you through sort of what that process was. What we ended up doing was entering into a process with this company, with New Chapter, to basically try to understand how their experience might inform our response and turn into some kind of programmatic actions. So the task force, we set up a task force about a year ago, and we defined the problems in 4 areas. We defined first the need for a firm to maximize their ability to be attractive to people, so to attract people to the job, but to the region also. We also looked at ways to sort of reach out and get people, and that relates to something very important to understand in today's job market, which is that the lack of people means that we really have to be more aggressive. We have to deal with passive candidates. We have to go find people and not wait for them to just see us. And then we also focused on sort of onboarding, which gets into the retention question. How do we get people who are especially coming here to the region afresh, making a successful transition into the workplace and into the community so that they stick, because retention is a big part of this. And then we also spent one of our 4 meetings on external factors that affect recruitment and retention, because we were hearing over and over and over again from both people who had come here, but also from recruiters, that housing and childcare and some of these not so external externalities were a huge issue and something that was at the forefront of their discussions with potential recruits. So the task force members included a great team from New Chapter, which is a company that's locally grown here, was effectively bought by Procter & Gamble, although still really locally controlled, and was at that point starting a process of bringing on board what has now become about 20 new people to the company. The task force also included other CEOs and some other community leaders, the town manager from Brattleboro, and folks from BDCC, especially the workforce team, Joan Goldstein, some of our representatives and senators. So flash forward to the end. There's a big report. You're welcome to read it. This is sort of the highlights. We found that what was working in terms of for New Chapter and for some of the other folks in the room was using the quality of life to attract and differentiate a job here from a job somewhere else, obviously. One of the other things that was interesting was that we found that selling the tri-state region was really important, because our economy is very spread out and diffuse. And so, for instance, if someone is coming here with a partner who needs to find a job, just looking at Brattleboro made it look a lot less like there was opportunity here than if they really understood that we're part of a broader region that encompasses Keene and over to Bennington and down to New Hampshire all the way to Springfield, Massachusetts and Hartford metropolitan areas. And that really helps sell, especially someone who is coming to a job who has a partner, a trailing spouse or partner who needs to also find work and opportunity. Other things that came up over and over was the importance of leveraging great companies, company culture, family businesses, and values like B Corp, sustainability, the VBSR brand. Management hands-on involvement in hiring was frankly critical to success, and you know, HR is obviously the infrastructure there, but the management involvement seemed to be a real differentiator. And then tapping networks, using sort of personal networks, both to hire people and then successfully onboard them. And then again, those externals, childcare, transportation. We identified some specific needs. Again, you're going to have this PowerPoint if you want it. And some things that these are needs that the employers needed help with. And some of it is just for them to, for instance, you know, down here, spend less of their time and money finding and connecting with the right people, helping them sort of leverage their efforts to better effect, helping people settle in, helping them with retention. And so we tried to sort of translate these things, what's working and what wasn't working, into something that's sort of programmatic. And we came up with some areas where we thought we could provide some value or build some collaborative approaches that would augment and improve the effectiveness of the employer efforts. This all starts with the assumption that companies need talent. So I'm going to back it up to the beginning. Some of these only have TERR with 1 R. We added retention later on, by the way. So it's important to understand that our organization develops programs that are built around some really fundamental objectives that are in our SEDS, and that includes increase the size and quality of the workforce. So TERR is a new program, but it is an extension of an existing suite of programs that we have that are designed to respond to various needs. Most of them so far have focused on developing the local workforce, working with high schoolers, augmenting training opportunities. However, we do have Southern Vermont Young Professionals, which was very explicitly set up as both a retention and an attraction program. So this is kind of building on that kind of approach. But TERR is very focused on bringing new people to the region. It is not only a value for that because the retention piece is sort of massive, but that's where we've heard the most acute need from employers. I will just remind us all of the Art Wolf forecasts and sort of their implications for labor force. One of his most dire predictions, just know we say this in a negative way, is that, you know, effectively having a population that's aging in place, which is great, also means that you are not replacing your retirees with new labor force, and that if you look at the cumulative effects of this, you know, his estimates are in this sort of 70,000 range over 30 years from 2010 to 2040. We're looking at what he calls a forced recession. I mean, and the point being, companies that have positions they can't fill or that they're expending increasing amounts of resources to fill this is not just that they aren't getting that work done, it causes structural pain for those organizations. And we see this at all different levels. We see companies that have been operating without a CFO for too long, and we have companies that have taken entire production lines offline because they can't fill entry-level labor. So this is just some more of the sort of labor force projections to make us all freak out. So one of the important things with the TERR program is it in some ways has an educational component. It's sort of trying to remind employers that this isn't a temporary thing. They really have to shift gears away from, you know, if we put a good job out there and post it, someone's going to come and, you know, come there. And we're going to have to go basically after people. Jobs follow people. So a lot of the jobs here obviously aren't going to go follow people, or they will. If we don't make it easier for them to fill the jobs here. Our hospitals can't follow people, but they are doing some outsourcing and some adjustment, and some of that is fine, and some of that is forced necessity, but not necessarily the way that they would most like to operate. So we're sort of in a general transition nationally, and we're really feeling that pinch here. I get asked over and over again what the regional demand is. I just urge people to go look on any of the Google API things or Indeed and just, you know, get a read on it. There is just a constant kind of flutter, and I really want to be clear that a lot of higher level jobs don't get posted. So it's really difficult to measure those. The talent pipeline work is obviously working towards this, but it is extremely difficult to know exactly at any given time what are sort of the mid-level and the management and the specialized technical jobs out there. So what we did after all of this sort of stressing out for 9 months about this problem was we tried to figure out how BDCC, how an organization like ours could help. And so one of the things that we can do is we can help our companies work together and collaborate, and we can, you know, this is a difficult challenge, but we also know that very few regions have a grip on this. And so when I'm sort of stressing out about this, I try to remind myself and our board that's been backing this effort that, you know, we don't have to be perfect at this, but we can outcompete other rural regions. There are people who want to live in places like this, and if we make ourselves easier to be found and the opportunities here easier to be found and help our employers reach out to those people, we're going to do better. Because this is a difficult nut to crack, and what we have an advantage in here, but also at the state level, is we have a jump on this. We identified this problem earlier, and we have a commitment to, you know, finding the workforce and reaching them and bringing them here. So one of the things that over and over again in these conversations, and I think you may find this if you have these conversations in your workplace or with your boards, or people very quickly want to try to solve the problem and say, okay, the kind of person we need is someone who likes to ski, and then they also have to not like the city and this and that. And here's my big piece of advice, which is we have to stop trying to over-engineer this. You know, we need people who can do the work we need done, and then we need people who have, for whatever reason, a desire to live here. And I was at Amy's in Brattleboro one day, and I thought this really summed it up perfectly. You know, that the jar of people who, the jars, this is the tip jars, the skiing and sledding jar did not have as much money in it as the indoor activities curled up by the fire jar. You know, so there's a lot of reasons why people choose to live here, and we don't have to narrow the field. We just have to figure out how to reach everyone who would consider an opportunity here or staying here. This is the last piece of under the hood stuff I think that I'll show you. We really got to understand the pain points in the process and put ourselves in the shoes of someone who would be coming. That was one of the great things about the task force. It was almost like an empathic journey. So, you know, you sort of imagine someone, you figure out how to get the job opportunity seen by people and they like the lifestyle fit, but then we still have to figure out how to convince the partner or how to make them picture themselves here. They have to figure out how to choose their school or community in an area that's very difficult to kind of grok. You know, it's not like Boston where you just Craigslist everything and you can kind of go through a series of levels of social media investigations to figure out like what neighborhood you're going to like. It isn't like that here. And we do a lot of these things through personal relationships, and that sort of understanding that personal networks and relationships was still going to be key to this is really built into the program we built. So we have kind of three really clear goals. We need to help employers find the people they need. We need to help them, frankly, like get better results, get better ROI on their actions. And in general, we need to deepen the pool, right? You know, this isn't just about one employer or one job. This is like we need to build the critical mass of people who are here. So our implementation is built around sort of 4 areas. One is around the Southern Vermont marketing campaign, so Vermont, and this is to help employers leverage what is attractive and valuable about the quality of life here to better effect as they are speaking to potential hires. And then there's some very specific technical assistance. One of the things we did is we bought a recruiter seat for LinkedIn so we could start to figure out how we can do a better job of reaching those passive candidates. Some of the research out there is saying that as many as 70% of the people that you're going to want to reach are not actively looking but willing to consider an opportunity. And that creates a very specific problem. They're not trolling Indeed, but it doesn't mean they're not willing to consider you. We're also going to be making some materials for recruiters just to help them tell the story of the region and tell the story of this region as an opportunity and kind of brand Southern Vermont as a place, that's not just great for skiing, but also great for a career and building a life. And then back to the point I was making earlier, we're really focused on these personal connections. The reality is that, we're not going to just systematize something. That in order to come here and make it stick, especially if you have a partner who comes here and doesn't have a job right away, or if you have special needs in your family, or if you're coming here as a single person, that those personal relationships, getting grounded into the community, or making professional connections so you can kind of build a career here are really critical. And we know that if people have a poor start, it's very difficult to recover from. And I'm going to sort of like skip ahead to sort of why that matters. I'm going to flow through here. One of the companies that we've spent a lot of time talking to because we'd like to implement their program at some point does a very hands-on, very high-touch concierge service for companies that helps their partners find jobs by specifically networking them to companies. Their entire business model is built on this understanding that the retention rate is something that companies are paying not enough attention to, and that it's costing them money they can't afford. And they use a lot of, they sort of did a thing for us. Basically, this is all of these really kind of expensive hires that we know we have companies looking for. And what they estimate based on sort of the Deloitte research is that you're looking at between 100 and 200% of an annual salary every time you have to fill a position, because you basically are between the recruitment resources, between the onboarding, the kind of productivity loss, the people who in the organization have to cover for that person's position, that your best case scenario when you have to fill like a position for a pediatric psychiatrist is on top of that annual salary, it costs you an additional, $163,000 a year. And that's, it's one of these things that is just sort of the cost of doing business, but it's a really big area where companies can experience some improved return on investment. And so the difficulty is going to be to figure out how to translate a lot of what we're going to do, which will be kind of in a soft area of marketing and personal support, into seeing over time whether this is helping to sort of reduce these hard costs in terms of what it takes to sustain an organization with a certain amount of recruitment and retention and turnover. But these are 213% is sort of not an unheard of industry standard for sort of what recruitment and retention costs are in these kinds of positions. So I'm just going to go back and, one of the things I want to point out is part of what we're trying to do is to create another step in the marketing funnel and a way to leverage the state's attention to this topic. So the Think Vermont campaign, which is about attracting entrepreneurs and businesses as well as workforce to the area, we're very mindful of this and trying to find ways to connect our efforts up to that. And that includes, most recently, the Stay to Stay, where we had a few of our companies that are participating in the TERR program act as hosts for folks being brought into the region through the state's Stay to Stay program. So I think that's probably enough detail on this. I would love to just open it up to questions and kind of tell people anything I can about the process that we went through and what else we're trying to get done this year and getting this up and running. I hear you, Jonathan. Let's hear it.
All right. My question had to do with the role that's, you mentioned that there are professional positions that don't really show up in the online realm to scrape out. Is there a role to play for recruiters, et cetera? I found that businesses that were really reluctant to participate in the Sustainable Marketing Recruitment Project almost always had a recruiting or a headhunter that they had on contract, and I was just curious if that's something that is there some room to work with them?
Yeah, what was really fun is by accident at the beginning of this process, which was we started this right after the Young Professionals Gala last year, and Alex Beck came into the office and he was like, I met this great couple. He's from the area, they just moved back, and she's an executive recruiter. And I said, who is she? And he said, I don't know. I was like, find her. You can find her today. So he did. And Geneva I commandeered her. I would say she volunteered, but that's not being fair about how aggressive I was. She became a huge part of this task force and a huge mentor because she's doing that work on behalf of companies. They hire her to find a CEO. We're mindful of the fact that a lot of companies are going out and using recruiters, but we were also hearing the problems they were having with that. I mean, A, it's expensive. B, the recruiters are not necessarily really good at leveraging that quality of life piece. They're based out of Boston and they're selling the position, but they aren't necessarily really looking for the person who's looking for that kind of a position in a place like this. And so and then there's also just, the questions about, we have a lot of small companies, and our smaller companies do have a harder time being able to afford and sustain that kind of support. So, I mean, it costs whatever it costs to hire a recruiter, and when you get someone who's a poor fit, that's a loss they feel keenly. And, part of that's cultural. Companies here don't like to spend money on outside help and consulting. But part of it, I think, reflects a real sense that as a small firm, you're not bringing a lot of business to the table for that recruiter, and you may not be getting the level of service that you need. And for you as a small company, when you only have, one accounts payable supervisor, you don't have 37, that hire matters even more to you, and you actually need more attention to that. So we're not trying to replace that, but we are also, part of why we did the LinkedIn seat was to just see if we could find ways to create some collaborative value, create some presence for Southern Vermont opportunities that weren't necessarily getting pushed out there very much. to play around with what that looks like, to understand it from the inside, and to then try to solve some very specific problems and see if we could really offer place-based recruiting in a way that was maybe more sensitive to the assets we had to leverage and the relationships and the processes here than perhaps a traditional recruiter. In our dream world, someone takes that on and makes that a business, because we really think there's a lot of need for a locally sensitive firm that would be willing to work across sectors and really, kind of build an audience of people who are looking at the region for opportunities across different occupations. I haven't convinced Geneva that she's the person to do that yet, but it's not off the table.
Cool. Thank you.
This is Whitney. Hi, Al. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Good. How are you?
So I had a question about the concierge stuff that you referred to earlier. I understand that you'd be, connecting folks with job opportunities and, more practical situations of living in Brattleboro or in the area. Is there any effort to build a community for these folks, like going kind of beyond that and having more, fostering more friendships?
Yeah, that's kind of, actually that's kind of where we're starting. On Thursday night we're having a party. You should come. Because in the end, it really, it's not about us, and it's not about those one-on-one things. You're right. It's about people really getting grounded in the community. So we're having a newcomers networking event where, we've asked people to bring their partners, and it's anyone who is a professional who has come to the area. And we didn't just invite people from the companies that we're working with, but I was really impressed by the response. Some of the companies, immediately sent us 5 emails like, oh my God, that would be so helpful. Here are 5 people we've hired this year who, really need this kind of touch. So,
awesome.
So yeah, that's definitely, obviously Young Professionals does that. So what we're really trying to do is just figure out how we can build around that incredibly successful core that has, that's the proof of concept. And it's just, who that doesn't maybe self-identify as terribly young or is in a different life stage or whatever, what else can we do to augment that kind of critical mass that's been built? Another piece of it is this was a really interesting experiment, because what we found was there's an area where companies can't operate. They can't actually get into the private lives of their employees. It's not appropriate. So even when they know, like if I hire this person and we can't figure out how to find really good services for their autistic child, they will not stay, or they won't take this job if they can map that out. They're not necessarily being invited into that with their potential hire or their new employee. And we're kind of like a little bit outside of that, and it's been nice that people have been really comfortable in that way. We've literally been asked to help people solve those kinds of questions, or help find certain kinds of medical care, or just solve for very specific kinds of professional connections. And it's really partly possible because I am not someone's boss. Sarah isn't someone's coworker or member of the HR team, and so that has been very surprising to us how much a few of the CEOs have really found it valuable to have that one step removed, but very committed, very personal support.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear. And I think that it's really interesting to hear about the difference between you guys and employers, obviously not getting involved in private lives. But I think that just to have folks, even if they don't attend events, knowing that they're out there makes a huge difference. So I think that's awesome.
Yes. I think that's part of, in the end, we're always, trying to come up with ways to measure what we do in a way that says, here's the impact, here's what the investment gets, when someone spends this, they're getting that, right? We're always pressured to do that. But over and over again, we're hearing that it's a lot of that kind of soft stuff that ends up having this like huge impact. If we're sending a message in 5 different ways that you are welcome here, we're so glad you're here, and you're really adding something by being here, whether or not you choose to participate actively in any of these things, that message is really important, and it's kind of a form of rebranding. It's like saying, we're not just like begrudgingly happy to eventually accept you into our community as Vermonters. It's like, no, we're super psyched. We want you here. And thanks for joining the club.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, you can't see me, but I'm nodding my head seriously.
Awesome. Are there any other questions, Doreen or Matt? Silence. Okay. Well, Jen, is there anything else you would like to say?
No, this is a big nut to crack, and we're coming at it from a bunch of different directions to see what spaghetti sticks to the wall. And we look forward to reporting back in a year. And and I guess one last piece is that Sarah asked me to mention, I totally didn't, which is that this also touches a lot of other recruiting things that we're trying to work on. When our internship coordinators out there, we're trying to figure out how to have alongside those internship opportunities at career fairs at colleges, additionally entry-level positions that we're advertising, so that we're constantly finding ways to extend our reach out there into the colleges, to the people who are here, figuring out how to network people who are already here into better positions or new positions. So this is not meant to just define one problem and not touch the rest of our recruiting and retention issues. We're just trying to programmatically define sort of some actions, but we're involved in a lot of different directions in trying to bring and keep all kinds of folks here.
Jonathan, thanks for the correction. Sorry. So next up, thank you, Jen, first of all. Our next Knowledge Bite sessions on May 8th, which I might add is my 30th birthday. We're going to have Archie Brown talk about the Instigate program, and he's got a ton of upcoming workshops and events. So he's going to talk about, everything that's upcoming for that. And then we are going to have the Bennington Idea Fund, Know Why, and that is a really cool sort of grassroots, from the ground up investment in ideas in Bennington. So Michelle Morocco is going to talk about that. And I'm also open to suggestions, so if there are any programs or resources that you want to know more about, let me know, and I'll get them on here. And I think that's it.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks guys.
Thank you.
Later.
Have a great
Bye.
one.